thank you for the opportunity to present at this Alzheimer Europe conference. Today, we're going to talk about an opportunity to collaborate with people living with frontotemporal dementia, looking at how we could work together to develop meaningful psychosocial interventions. So the original research study, the aim was to explore and understand the experience of living with a diagnosis of FTD. But I would like to draw your attention in particular to the second research question, which is, what do people with frontotemporal dementia feel helps and hinders them to live well with this condition? So in terms of recruitment and ethics, recruitment was assisted by Alzheimer Scotland, one local authority and one carers group, and ethical approval was sought and given through the normal processes and routes in Scotland. In terms of participants, you'll see that there were 7 participants involved in the study, all with a diagnosis of FTD. And this culminated in 13 interviews. So the interviews lasted between an hour to an hour and a half each. And if you look at the demographics, the age range of participants was from 52 years to 68 years, included 5 men and 2 women. People had received their diagnosis a few months before the first interview, up to 6 years before the first interview. And it's very important to note that all lived with a family member who's providing some significant amounts of support. And that may well be a limitation of the study, in that there was no one who was living alone with FTD in this study. So the methodology used is interpretative phenomenological analysis. And basically, this is trying to understand the truth of that person's experience and trying to make sense of how that person themselves makes sense of that experience. So I've mentioned already there were semi-structured interviews. All the interviews were audio recorded, and 6 people had 2 interviews, and they were a few weeks apart, which proved to be really helpful as a novice IPA researcher, because I was able to start the transcription, start the analysis, look at emergent themes, and use those to probe more deeply in the second interview. So this is just an example of using IPA. So this is the transcription of the interviews. And if you look at the column to the right, the normal font is the facts. That's what the person is telling me. That's their truth. The parts that are underlined is my interpretation of what has been said or discussed. And the parts with italics is looking at particular in the language that the person has selected to use, any particular terminology, if there are any pauses or any points that seem to be extremely important or emotional that needed to be drawn out more in the analysis. So overall, there were 4 superordinate themes that emerged. So they were the rocky road through assessment, the changing self, in touch with reality, and keeping going. And what I'll do in the next few slides is draw out some of the key important points that I think lend themselves to the collaborative development of psychosocial interventions, that opportunity that's there for us. To let you understand how some of the quotations reflect the particular issues surrounding people experiencing FTD, I'd like to draw your attention to the middle quote on this page. So this is about a gentleman who was driving his car along the motorway and stopped on the hard shoulder to put new windscreen wash into the car, but in doing so opened the passenger door of the car and stepped into the main carriageway of the motorway, placing himself at significant risk. His wife was in the car with him, and she was very distressed and shouting at him. And this is him reflecting on that. And what he says is, and she could not convince me all through the day that that was the wrong thing to do. So she just had to leave it. And then as time goes by, she thinks, well, we can talk about it together. I can see how dangerous that was. But even just now, back of the mind, I think that it wasn't all that dangerous, but it was. So for me, this demonstrates that this gentleman is very able to reflect, has high levels of insight and awareness, but the issue seems to be accessing previous knowledge or making decisions in the moment. So insight and awareness, is it an insight and awareness issue, or is it more a processing issue? So this illustrates all of the themes brought together from the study, and you'll see that there are two overarching themes, and one is hearing the voice. When I did the literature review for this piece of research, I could only find one study that had actually spoken to people with FTD about how it is to live with the condition, and that was a study by Griffin et al. In 2015. So what's come from my research and is extremely important is hearing the voice of people with FTD and giving them the opportunity to exercise some control over their journey or the support that they receive. So what were the findings? So person-centred assessment, we need wider collaboration for this group of people. If you look at the age range, if you look at the working profiles, we maybe need to be widening it out beyond health and social care partners to Department of Work and Pensions, careers advice. The sense of loss, particularly around the working role, I wonder if there are some stigma related to FTD with the Lund-Manchester criteria mentioning deficits in insight and awareness. So I think we need to do a piece of work around that. Again, just highlighting the importance of someone being there. All of these 7 participants lived with someone providing support. I do think there's a role for staff in helping people with FTD to manage their own emotions. And as we've already spoken about previously, there are high levels, all 7 participants had high levels of insight and awareness, fluctuated slightly, but overall were very high, and all described in the moment decision making as problematic, but not necessarily demonstrating any issues with insight and awareness upon reflection. Not planning ahead was an important mechanism, coping mechanism in itself. So we need to look at our future care planning, anticipatory care planning, advanced care planning, and it might be that people with FTD may not want to participate in that, so it has to be person-centred. The 7 participants all said that the symptom of FTD that affected their quality of life most adversely were physical symptoms, so we need some interventions around that. And overall, people with FTD must be in collaboration working on development of these interventions because we need to exercise control and to be heard. So what were the recommendations for clinical practice and development of non-pharmacological interventions? So there are 9 of them. So 1, people with a diagnosis of FTD should be meaningfully involved in decisions regarding their care and support. 2, raising awareness of FTD should be implemented in training for frontline clinicians supporting people with all types of dementia. 3, specialist clinicians and educators of clinical staff should review the risk assessment procedures given what we've just discussed. 4, all assessments involving people with probable or possible FTD should be person-centred. 5, physical assessment of people with FTD should be incorporated into all assessment processes, planning, implementation, and any types of evaluation types of support. 6, future planning or anticipatory care planning or advanced care planning processes should be reviewed to meet the wishes of the person with FTD. 7, in Scotland, the Sound Dementia Guidelines are about to be published. These reflect the views of people with FTD and need to be implemented fully. 8, people with FTD and family caregivers of people with FTD require access to FTD-specific information. And finally, 9, communication and sharing of information between organisations and agencies and people with FTD is absolutely fundamental. If you're interested in finding out more about the experiences of the 7 people mentioned in the study, there is a paper now published in the journal Dementia. I'm hoping to get a second paper published around the topics discussed today. If you are a person with FTD or a stakeholder and you would like to collaborate with me in some of these projects, please get in touch with me. I would be absolutely delighted to hear from you. There's my email address. Please just pop me a wee email and I will get back in touch with you. And thank you very much for listening to this presentation today.